The return of the prodigal son. Then he said, "A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me.' So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. There are 3 parables in Luke chapter 15. The first is the parable of the shepherd who found his lost sheep. The next tells of a woman who found a silver coin she had lost. And the last is the story of a father whose lost son returned to him. The passage above is the account of the lost son. The father had 2 sons. The younger son went to his father and said, Father, let me have my share of the inheritance now in advance. He kept pestering his father in this way until his kind-hearted father agreed, saying, Is that what you want? You'll be getting it later anyway, so why not take it now? He divided up his wealth and gave half to the son, whereupon the son, waiting to be able to live as he pleased, took his inheritance and went off to a distant land, far away from his father. There, he lived a life of debauchery and wasted all his money. He would have been drinking, visiting brothels, and probably gambling as well, and he ended up a beggar. He was so hungry, he went to some house to ask for work in exchange for food, and he was given a job looking after the pigs. He became a swineherd. The father in this parable is God. Who is the prodigal son? He is the sinner. The son becoming a swineherd represents the people who have gone far away from God and live purely for the sake of their flesh. The flesh is represented by the pigs. The prodigal son completely neglected his spirit, and, like a pig, he concerned himself only with his flesh. You, too, have probably lived your life until now, considering only how you can eat well, wear nice clothes, become rich, and have a life full of fun. This is what it means to live as a pig. Then one day, this younger son was so hungry that he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, but no one gave him anything to eat, not even the pig's food. So he began to give some deep thought to his situation. Aware that he was starving, he regretted what he had done and decided to go home, apologize to his father, and say to him, I am no longer worthy to be your son. He decided to tell his father his situation and ask him to take him on as a hired servant so that he might have something to eat. This hired servant is like the person who makes up his mind to be a little more diligent. He thinks, I'll make an effort to try harder. These are the people referred to here in the term hired worker. Perhaps, with you, this has taken the form of praying harder. Comforting yourself with giving large donations is another act of a hired worker. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Let me be a hired worker." The son made up his mind to do this and set off back to his father's house. Now, let's think about this from the father's point of view. When the son left home, the father probably entreated him, saying, "Wherever you go, take care of yourself, work hard at your business, and let me know how you are doing. Send me letters and come and see me as often as you can." The son would have promised to do this, but the father waited, and there was no news of his son. The son did not write, and neither did he come and see his father. He was completely lost to him. We are that son. We have become lost sons before God. The father would have been eager to receive news of his son, and then he might have heard rumors. "This is terrible. Rumor has it that your son has become a beggar and is now working as a swineherd, feeding the pigs." From the day he heard this news, the father probably had a hard time sleeping at night as he thought about his son. The father had many hired servants, and the whole household had plenty to eat. They all lived in wealth and comfort, but his son had gone far away, had nothing to eat or to wear, and was surviving only by feeding someone else's pigs. The father could not bear even the thought of this. The father was extremely rich. But how rich is God? The father was not concerned at all about the riches the son had squandered. He just waited every day, hoping that his son might by chance return home. He stood by the front gate of his house, waiting every day in case he came. At night, he probably left some food out and the door slightly ajar, so there would be something for his son to eat if he should come home in the dark hours. Then one day, the father saw his son in the far distance, plodding along without any strength as he came towards him. He was certain it was his son, so he went running to him. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. The father fell on his son's neck and kissed him. Since he had been taking care of someone's pigs, he must have stunk of the pigs and their dung. He would have looked filthy as well, since he had not been able to wash properly, and his breath must have smelt, since he had not been able to brush his teeth. Yet, the father ran wildly to his son, fell on his neck, and kissed him. Such is God's love for sinners. As sinners, we are smelly, filthy, and wicked. But God does not scold us or, indeed, say anything at all about this. Such is the heart of God. Even though God hates sin, he does not hate the sinner. He loves him. No matter how many bad things a child has done, wouldn't his parents be full of sorrow if the child were to die or become very ill? In this respect, there is no comparison between the love of God and that of our parents. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son." The son was intending to say, "I have sinned so much that I am no longer worthy to be your son. Please take me on as one of your hired servants." But his father stopped him. "That's enough. There's no need for such talk." He ordered the best robe to be brought out and put on his son. What is the best robe? It is the robe of salvation. Where in the world will you find a better robe than the robe of salvation? When you are clothed in the garment of salvation, you have peace. All your sin vanishes, and you are not afraid. And put a ring on his hand. A ring signifies a promise. In the past, kings would set their seal using a signet ring. A couple also exchanges rings as they make their marriage vows. And sandals on his feet. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 15, it says, "And having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace." The gospel is expressed as sandals for the feet. "And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry." This fatted calf is Jesus. Jesus became the sacrificial offering like the fatted calf, and in him, God the Father and the sinner meet. The only place where we can meet God is in Jesus. since the problem of our sin was resolved in the cross of Jesus. It is there that we meet God. And bring the fatted calf here, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Was it because the son came back and said, Father, I have sinned, please forgive me, that the father forgave him? Was it because the son begged him, tears streaming down his face? It was not when the father saw his son's tears that he forgave him, and neither was it because his son gave him a donation of money. The father had already forgiven his son before he came back to him. Such is the heart of God. God is not to be feared, as people tend to think. The fearful God is the God of justice. God's judgment of man's sin is something to be afraid of, but God has taken that judgment upon himself so that man will not perish. God is the God of love, who has provided forgiveness of sin. And he was waiting earnestly for man to return to him long before anyone turned to him and begged him in tears to forgive them. God forgave us 2,000 years ago, at a time when we did not know him and had not even begun to seek him. Such is God's love and God's forgiveness. A person who has sinned has turned away from God in his heart because of his sin. It is man who has turned away from God. God has not turned away from us. The younger son sold his share of the inheritance and squandered the money on a life of debauchery, but the father was extremely wealthy. What did the father want? Did he want his son to return his share of the fortune? The father did not care in the slightest about the fortune. He just wanted his son to come back to him, even with his beggarly appearance. He just wanted to see his son again. God is infinitely tolerant. He sees things on a huge scale. He is full of love, and he is extremely generous. He has immeasurable love for us, and has taken great pity on us, worried that we might not be saved and will consequently end up in hell. God has already forgiven us for our sins, and is just telling us to believe.